Coming up, a Florida player criticizes a coaching decision and an update to a key Tennessee injury. All that and more next on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to AT&T's SEC Country Live. That is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It is great to have you with us on our program today. You know, Tennessee got a big win over Georgia Tech on Monday. About a half an hour or so from right now, we'll check in Knoxville with our own Mike Griffith, get an update from him about how Tennessee's dealing with that in the aftermath. And in between now and then after that, a whole lot more on what is another busy weekend coming up here in the SEC.
No shortage of storylines, especially with some of the cupcakes coming up and with some of the big showdowns like Georgia, Auburn. Some of these teams are playing big games this weekend.
Yeah, we'll do all of that. Let me remind you, though, that AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And now let's dive in to the show the way we start it each and every day. Item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list takes us to Gainesville, Florida. A couple issues here with Florida. Game change time. We'll get to that in a moment. Before that, though, maybe a more pertinent issue for the Gators on the field. What would appear to be a little criticism from a Florida player about Jim McElwain and some of the coaching decisions made on Saturday in the loss to Michigan. Let me show you a quote here from Florida running back Mark Thompson to SECCountry.com and other gathered reporters about Felipe Franks. Thompson says, "It was the man's first game. He played well in my opinion. We got to let him play the full game. We can't take him out halfway through the game. That's above my pay grade. I don't have any say in that. But I think he was playing well. I think he'll continue to play well." So he's got confidence in his quarterback, Felipe Franks. But how about Thompson right there questioning McElwain and Nussmeier's decision to pull Franks out during the game and bring in Malik Zaire? This would appear to be a problem. Would you agree?
I wonder if Jim McElwain shouldn't take a page out of Butch Jones' playbook, bring Peyton Manning here to say, have your coach's back, have this guy's back right here, because it doesn't appear that he has that guy's back. And, you know, I love the passion from Mark Thompson. I love the fact that he really has Felipe Franks back. I think that's a good thing for your teammates. But Mark Thompson, you have 5 carries and 13 yards in this game. This game was about the offensive line. This was not about the quarterback play. I know what Jim McElwain was thinking. He thinks if I put in Malik Zaire, maybe they'll defend us a little bit differently. Maybe it'll spark the offense. I don't think anything Florida was doing throughout this game offensively would have won them the game. So I think it's easy to go in there and kind of second-guess Jim McElwain and judge him on what he did with the quarterbacks. But this game was about the offensive line. This game was about the running game. This game was about being dominated up front. It wasn't about anything Felipe Franks was going to do in the second half to win the game.
Here's my issue with McElwain on this. We'll hear a little bit more from Mark Thompson in just a moment, or we'll see some more from Thompson in just a moment. But here's my issue with McElwain. He tolerates a lot of this kind of stuff. Mark Thompson on his own. Remember the tweet from a couple weeks ago when he said, "I can't wait to beat the brakes off of Michigan because he felt like the Gators have been disrespected"? For the most part, McElwain doesn't try to stop that. Remember before the Tennessee game last year, a lot of talk from those Florida defensive backs about the Tennessee Vols. McElwain didn't try to slow that down either. McElwain is okay with this kind of stuff. When you allow loose-lipped players, you get these kinds of things from Mark Thompson where he turns that big mouth on the Florida coaching staff here. And I believe this is an issue for that Florida locker room. And in a lot of ways, 2 bad quarterbacks can divide a locker room worse than 2 good quarterbacks can. And that may be the case here with Florida.
Well, and I think in this case, too, when you talk about Jim McElwain, winning cures all. You know, you're all friends. It's all fun and games when you're winning football games, and they're not right now. And they looked very bad this past weekend. So I don't know how he should deal with the situation. I think when you look at Mark Thompson's role on this offense, what is he going to do, bench him? I mean, he already was not the starting running back. Yeah. You already have 2 guys ahead of him on the depth chart in Pirine and Jordan Scarlett when he comes back off his suspension. So I don't think the carries are there. I don't think the offense is going to be affected in any way. I just think that Mark Thompson needs to be brought into his office and told, listen, this is not a good look for you. I know what you meant. I know that you're trying to have Felipe Franks back. You know, it seems like it's us against the world right now in this locker room, but that's not going to help us win football games. Don't be a fan, be a teammate, and be a player, and try to have everybody's back in this building.
Jimmy Moss in the comment section says that Thompson should be benched because you can't call out your teammates like that. Justin Willoughby, though, also says, hey, as long as that Florida offensive line is as bad as it is, it doesn't matter what they're saying about really any point there. Which brings me back to something else that Mark Thompson said here. We showed you that one quote. How about another quote about the play calling and the direction of the offense? Mark Thompson, the Florida running back, says, receivers are going to hate me for this, but we need to run the ball more. This guy's just, this guy's like a fan. This looks like a message board comment, not a statement from a player after a game.
This looks like everything the Bama fans have been saying about Lane Kiffin the last 3 years. We got to run the ball more, run the dang ball. And I think there is some truth to that. I think if you were having better success up front on the offensive line, that you probably would have. I mean, when you look at their offensive numbers, really came out of the game with 11 yards rushing when you factor in Zaire. Even without Zaire and his loss of yardage, you have 40 yards rushing for these Florida Gator offense. That's not what Florida's been built on. They are a team that has had a historic amount of running backs in the past, have been able to gain yards about just about any defense they faced here in the last few years. Couldn't get it done. So I don't know what you want to rewind and second guess about the game. I don't know anybody other than the secondary really has any bragging rights about what they did in this football game. That's running backs, wide receivers, offensive line, and quarterbacks on that side of the ball. You thought this offense would be able to carry this football team. Nothing they did on that side of the ball really looked like something that could have won the football game. So second guess all you want to. The outcome would not have changed if you run the ball, if you leave Felipe Franks in, if you make the wide receivers mad, if Jordan Scarlett is there. They wouldn't have won the football game under any of those circumstances.
Interesting tweet from Charlie Adams, who says that Jim McElwain is 19-9 through 28 games. Charlie says that's the same record that Muschamp had through the same total of games there at Florida, seat heating up. I predicted this back during the offseason. I said that McElwain would be on the hot seat by the end of this season. Now listen, I'm not going to make too much out of one game. I expect for Florida to play a lot better in a lot of games this season compared to how it played against Michigan. But the Michigan game, I do believe, demonstrated some glaring holes that we talked about before the season even began.
Absolutely. And when you talk about those 28 games, I mentioned this stat yesterday, 13 of them, they have been held to under 20 points. And listen, they were held to under 20 points this weekend, and that's with 2 defensive touchdowns. And that just says all you need to know. And we got, talked about on here from Florida fans that we were disrespecting this offense, disrespecting this football team. There was a reason for that. There is a ton of holes. There is a lot left to be decided about what this football team is. I know they went to Atlanta the last couple of years, but when you match up against Alabama and Florida State the last couple of years, that's told you the tale of what this football team has been. They face another top 10 caliber team in Michigan, and really your personality comes out. So I think it's going to be good for this football team to get back to one of these games. I think they play Northern Colorado this week. Reestablish yourself, start to establish that style of play you want moving forward, and see if you can get better at running the ball and at passing the ball from this quarterbacking position.
One final point for me on this. These are not open locker rooms in college football. The teams get to select the players that speak for the team. Mark Thompson, at least to my understanding, would have been selected by the Florida PR staff to speak on behalf of the team yesterday. You normally pick people who are going to say what you want to say, toe the team, company / line. If Mark Thompson's the guy they did pick to speak, what are the guys who are there not allowing to speak? What are they saying right now? That to me seems like a legit question.
This is probably the last time we'll see Mark Thompson enter that meeting room for quite some time, because Jim McElwain has probably got him in his office right now. I don't know that he has the same button that Nick Saban has, where you press the button and the door closes behind you and you have to sit down and have a talk with the head man.
Yeah.
That's never a good feeling, and I guarantee you that's something he's going to see today. He's going to be talked to by Jim McElwain and say, listen, I understand your opinion. I understand that this offense didn't look the way we want to, but nobody around here is to blame. You're not going to blame Doug Nussmeier. You're not going to blame Malik Zaire. You're not going to blame the head coach. Blame everybody, and we've all got to get better.
More Florida coming up in the program, including some thoughts on the game change for Florida now at noon for the Gators on Saturday as they get ready to play Northern Colorado. For now, though, item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. Tennessee does get a double overtime victory against Georgia Tech on Monday night, but the game does not come without a cost, or in the aftermath of that game, there is some bad news for Tennessee to deal with here. Here is Tennessee coach Butch Jones updating the situation on JaJuan Jennings, one of the most important playmakers of the Tennessee offense. Here's Coach Jones.
In terms of JaJuan's injury, it's indefinite, and that's all I can say at this particular time. I really can't get into specifics.
So that's Butch Jones saying that. Media speculation has Jennings up to 12 weeks absence, which could take him out for the rest of the season here. I'll ask you this now. We'll talk to Mike Griffiths from SECCountry.com about this a little later on. How big is the loss for Jennings in the immediate future and really as long as it lasts here in 2017?
I think it's a huge loss. I really do, and I understand that they were able to come back and win the football game without him. But when I saw the play, I thought he broke his arm. I mean, he really did. It was a nasty play. His arm gets caught between himself and one of the defenders that was coming in to hit him. It ends up being a serious injury. I know that Marquez Callaway really emerged as your go-to guy, but now all of a sudden, a wide receiver depth chart that was already thin coming from last year, all of a sudden you have to develop more of those guys. You have to find more answers for that offense. John Kelly, I believe, was the second leading receiver in this game. You're going to turn to him a little bit more, but some of these guys have got to perform up front. Brandon Edward-Johnson, 3 catches for 14 yards. Seems like he's going to be the next guy up, the next guy that the Vols can find as a go-to wide receiver. Somebody has to emerge out of that position because what we saw from Tennessee this weekend, you're going to be able to run the football, but you've also got to have those wide receivers to balance out this offensive game plan. And so far right now, without JaJuan Jennings, you're losing a big piece up front.
So obviously the Jennings loss seems to be huge, and I think it is significant. But here's the positive spin I'll put on this. I think that Quentin Dormady on Monday night showed that he might be the kind of quarterback that can help develop a wide receiver a little bit. You know, I'm not going to tell you that Dormady's in like the short list for the Heisman Trophy or anything like that based on his numbers against Georgia Tech, but they were pretty good. Completion percentage not great, but he avoided turnovers, threw a couple touchdowns, more than 200 yards passing. I thought Dormady had a pretty good day, and he may be a quarterback good enough to help bring a wide receiver on here. He might not need the veteran Jennings the way that a less talented quarterback or a less capable quarterback might be in need of. I think Dormady might actually be able to help that wide receiver core a little bit.
Well, yeah, and he's an upperclassman. He's not one of these guys that's going to look for a safety net. He's not going to one of those guys that's going to say, where's JaJuan Jennings? I need to get it to him. Also, the emergence of Ethan Wolf this weekend. 4 catches, I believe he had 30-something yards. That's going to be a big piece of this offense moving forward. He's a guy that obviously we've talked about a bunch this summer.
Maybe a little tougher than some people gave him credit for, by the way.
The much maligned Ethan Wolf comes up with some big catches in the game this weekend. I have no question that the Vols have the talent out wide. I think it's just getting these guys in rhythm and getting them reps with Quentin Dormady. It's going to be a big piece for this football team. It's a good thing that they have some time to kind of figure this out before some of those tough games in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think that's right, because obviously you circled that Florida game for Tennessee, and it seems like these are two very different programs right now. Whereas, you know, maybe you still feel okay about the Florida defense. I know that Duke Dawson really showed out in the secondary against Michigan, but that offense is bad. The Tennessee offense may be pretty good. The defense may not be very good. That Tennessee-Florida game when they play in a couple weeks could not get more interesting still.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you talk about the Tennessee defensive line, the much maligned Tennessee defensive front from this past weekend. They will match up well against Florida's offensive line. From what I saw this last weekend, it should be a good matchup for Tennessee. So I think as long as you can still run the ball with John Kelly against that Florida defensive front, I think as an offense, Tennessee still feels good about that game in a few weeks.
All right, item number 3 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Let's keep the injury talk going here and update the situation on LSU star pass rusher Arden Key, who, according to Ed Orgeron, still not cleared for contact. Orgeron gave us a couple more details than that. Let's listen into the LSU coach.
He's still waiting to be cleared for contact. We're going to do a little bit more with him today. I want to see what he can do. He'll get a little more contact today as far as repetitions. I don't know if he's full speed yet, but we're bringing him along in increments. He is not ready to play. He has not been cleared to play for a game yet.
So I'm of two minds on this. Of the one hand, it's Chattanooga. You don't need Arden Key to beat Chattanooga, the Mocs, if you're LSU. But on the other hand, I mean, if we just want to keep it real, on this show we try to, some of those pictures that we saw of Arden Key back during the offseason did not make him look like he was in game shape. This guy needs to rush the passer on the field, I think, if he's going to be capable of kind of going out and doing what LSU needs for him to do in its most important games. I'm going to say it's a little bit of something that he's still not cleared to play.
It absolutely is. And listen, he's having his own little mini version of training camp is what he's doing. He's getting back into game shape. A guy who didn't go through spring and missed most of training camp this year, he's having his own little deal where he's getting back into it. But I mentioned this going into the BYU game. I told you I felt pretty good about this LSU football team against BYU, and that played out in itself. They have this new cheetah defensive package where they get all these linebackers and DB on the field, really able to chase after the quarterback. And this schedule lines up to where they should not miss Arden Key a ton. Mississippi State's the only team they have coming up that they really should be forced to rush the passer against. You know, you've got Troy coming up, Syracuse. Some of those games LSU should be able to win, so Arden Key should take his time. I think this is a good decision by the coaching staff down there. Listen, this guy is our most valuable player. He's the best defensive player we have. Let him take his time, and then when we get back into the meat of this SEC schedule, he should be up to speed in the Arden Key that we're used to.
Did you say the cheetah system? Is that what it is?
The cheetah defense.
I thought that was Ole Miss's recruiting philosophy. I thought they were the cheetahs in the SEC.
That's here.
I thought they were the cheetahs.
Yeah, they might be. They might be. They were definitely.
So I'll give you credit for this. You were on LSU for week 1. I was not. I thought plus the 14, the 17, whatever it was. I thought BYU might actually be a pretty good bet. But I'm just going to caution you. There's a lot of potential overreactions the first week of the season. And maybe even for Florida's sake, maybe there's an overreaction that they're not as bad as they look to be against Michigan. LSU, though, it's the other way around. LSU shut out BYU, didn't let them cross midfield. If you let that one game be some sort of piece of evidence to make you think, whether you're an LSU fan or not, we've got some great ones who watch this show every day. I wouldn't read too much into one game when it comes to LSU, and I wouldn't be so quick to assume they don't need Arden Key back for the big, important games they're going to play, despite the fact the defense looked so good against BYU on Saturday.
No, I agree with you. You know, I'm not obviously not crowning them champions of the West just yet. I think that their schedule just shapes up to be exactly what they need. They needed to figure out who they were under Matt Canada. They needed to figure out what Danny Etling was. They needed to reestablish Darius Geis with some of the time he missed and get Arden Key back healthy. When you look at how their schedule matches up, Chattanooga, Mississippi State, Syracuse, Troy. It's not until Florida, October 7th, and by the way, Florida didn't look that great this last weekend, that you feel like they're really going to get tested.
Yeah.
It's really the Auburn game, I would say October 14th, where you really need Arden Key to be Arden Key. And so that gives them some time to develop.
That may be your hottest take on this show so far. Now, I hope you got that. First of all, I love when Mike goes schedule on us. Because
I had to bring it up.
That's when the real analysis begins, when you go schedule. So Mike goes schedule on us there. And then I don't know if you caught this. Y'all should tweet this. Mike just said that LSU could beat Florida without Arden Key.
I did, and I feel that way. And listen, that was the much maligned offensive line that I saw from Florida. I don't see how Florida is going to be able to block most of LSU's front the way they looked this past weekend with some of the speed they were bringing against BYU. Granted, Florida's offensive line is not BYU's offensive line, but they didn't look much better when you saw what they were doing against Michigan. So I do feel comfortable right now in taking LSU to beat Florida handily.
So all you Florida fans who always take shots at me for taking shots at you, how about you take a shot at Mike Johnson over that one?
Bring it on.
That's my subtle message. How about y'all lay off me for a change and give him a little bit of grief? By the way, that is Mike Johnson. My name's Brandon Adams. You're watching AT&T's SEC Country Live here on the AT&T Facebook page. Of course, AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. We'll check in Knoxville, Tennessee a little later on with Mike Griffith. We've also got a brand new feature on the show today that we'll do in just a moment, taking a look back at one of the great years in SEC history. If you're a longtime fan of college football, you'll love what we're doing here coming up in just a couple of minutes. Before we get to that, though, item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So I think that Nick Saban may have gotten the ultimate compliment for him, a somewhat unlikely source. You know, these talking head hot take shows on TV, not that we're anything like that at all. But Shannon Sharpe's on Undisputed with Skip Bayless. Some of these you sort of get confused a little bit.
Yeah,
some of these shows run together.
I agree.
But I thought that Shannon Sharpe gave Nick Saban the ultimate compliment recently. And really, when you're looking for a great way to kind of summarize what Nick Saban's been to college football over the last decade, maybe Shannon Sharpe says about as well on FS1 as anyone could. Take a look at this short clip from Undisputed.
If you play St. Nick on opening day, you taking the L.
It's just you just book it.
Okay, guys, listen. We're gonna start week 2.
Yeah, he just shellacked Sam Darnold's team last year on opening day. Sam Darnold didn't get to play. So
ain't he glad? Ain't he glad?
So listen, is it as simple as that? Is it a mistake to even open a season with Alabama because of the teams they've sort of laid waste to here over the last few years?
Well, listen, you know me. I hate using the past as something that's going to predict the future. I think that when you talk about some of these games, especially the rivalry games, you don't ever know how that's going to translate from last year to this year or 2 years ago to this year. And we see that pop up every year, you know, especially in our comment section where, you know, Georgia hasn't beaten Florida here and there, or Auburn, you know, haven't. I understand that. I do think there's something to this, though. Nick Saban had a ton of time to prepare for this game. I don't know that it showed on defense. I don't know that it showed on offense. I think they look like the Alabama of old that you're used to. But on special teams, when they attacked some of these special teams units from Florida State, it looked like Nick Saban had an entire offseason to prepare for these guys. They game planned them on special team. It looks like sometime back in May, Nick Saban saw on film, oh, well, they overload on the punt. Oh, well, we can get these guys on the field goal team here, and actually was able to execute some of the plays that he put in. So I don't know if it's just the opening game. I don't know if they obviously overmatched Florida State. But I think there is something, too, giving Nick Saban some extra time to prepare, and I think he has been very good in some of those situations.
It'd be a better conversation right now if I disagreed with you. That'd make for a better debate. But the truth is, I actually don't disagree with you. I think Saban is good in these kinds of games in a unique fashion in the way that he's not in bowl games. Yeah. We've seen him getting beaten up bad by Bob Stoops in Oklahoma. Got embarrassed, sorry to say this, against Utah. I mean, we've seen them drop some bowl games. We've seen them lose twice in the college football playoff. We've seen high-profile non-conference games not go Alabama's way. But to start a season, you don't ever see this. So there is something about the way that Saban prepares. There's something about the stage that he gets his team comfortable playing on that does overwhelm the competition here. You put it in an end-of-season scenario, you don't see the same kind of success from Alabama. But at the beginning of the season, when it keeps happening every single year, even last year when USC wasn't playing Sam Darnold, you still got to count that. Alabama dominates in these kind of games. I do think you've got to give Saban some of that credit.
Yeah, and listen, first of all, what I'll answer to your thing is maybe it's just something about the Sugar Bowl, because that's 3 of the biggest losses Nick has ever taken. And there's something about that. But even when you line up USC and you look at that USC team from last year, still incredibly talented, and Alabama played 3 quarterbacks last year. I mean, Jalen Hurts fumbles his first snap. They had no idea what was going on. Still win by, 40 points last year against USC. So that's a talented team that you're taking on there in week 1. And we've seen it year in and year out, where you play these teams in week 1, Clemson, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, and all go on to be very good football teams, that Alabama seems to dominate in week 1. And there is something to it. And I don't know, I'm not going to pick out one game and say, well, this one he really schemed better than these guys offensively or defensively. But when you look at what happened, especially on special teams, and it's been a common occurrence throughout some of these openers for Alabama, I do think there is a theme in that, and giving Nick Saban an entire offseason to prepare for you.
Colt Gotti in the comment section, he says Lane Kiffin's going to be the next coach at Florida or Texas A&M. Colt, I don't know if that's true, but speaking of Alabama, did you see what Kiffin said at the end of last week about how if he had been the offensive coordinator, Alabama would have beaten Clemson in the national championship game? And listen, I've been saying this for a while. Kiffin's mouth is a problem for Alabama. Anytime something goes wrong for Alabama, and something's going to go wrong this year, I mean, you saw Hurts, scuffle his way through the game against Florida State. Kiffin's going to talk, and while it was all fun, sunshine and rainbows for Alabama in the opener, at some point in time, that offense is going to become an issue. Kiffin's going to do a national radio interview about it. So no matter where he coaches in the future, his presence at FAU right now, I still think it's going to be a problem for Alabama this season.
And you know what's crazy? I agree with Lane Kiffin, but my problem with his statement is that Nick Saban's not the one that's messed this up. Jalen Hurts didn't mess this up. Steve Sarkisian's not to blame here. Lane Kiffin's the one to blame. So he should be apologizing to his players that he left behind, because he was the one that messed up this opportunity. Nick Saban just didn't get rid of him for no reason. Lane Kiffin, too many times during all that bowl preparation, was caught underprepared. And so that Lane can go off running his mouth, but he has nobody else to look at but himself in the mirror for that debacle last year.
All right, speaking of running off at the mouth, a story that's been going on ever since Sunday night is the subject of item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Now, let me see if I can do all of this justice. So Texas A&M has the huge lead against UCLA, completely gives that lead away, loses the game, so much so that a member of the Texas A&M Board of Regents goes on Facebook, calls for Kevin Sumlin to lose his job, kind of an very outspoken criticism there of Kevin Sumlin on that. And since then, there's been a lot of reaction to the Board of Regents' reaction of Kevin Sumlin, including this from ESPN Radio. Let me let you hear former Auburn Ole Miss coach Tommy Tuberville, now ESPN analyst, coming to the defense of Kevin Sumlin. Here's Tuberville from ESPN Radio.
Yeah, he just opened up a can of worms. That's what he did. And, a lot of times these board of regents or board of trustees, they get way too more involved than what they should be. And that's the problem with social media now. Anybody can make a statement. And, of course, him being on the board of regents, and they have a ton of them. I mean, it's like they don't have 3 or 4. They've got a ton of board of regents. But you had one person that turned into a fan overnight. And when you're a board of regents or administrator, you can't be a fan. You've got to be an administrator. You've got to be somebody in a leadership role, and you've got to be able to sit back and look at all things that are added to this situation, not add to it yourself. They had a tough time. Texas A&M played a great game to a certain point, but again, they're still not a great football team, and they were on the road. 34-point lead, even as a head coach, you look at it going, man, is there anything you could have done different? And I'm sure there could have been. But at the end of the day, you don't have a board of regents come out and say, this guy needs to step down. We need to make a change.
Listen, not many times in my life have I said this statement. I agree with Tommy Tuberville right there. It just, to me, if you're going to go out and ask your players not to embarrass this football team or this university, and all these social media people are out there going into these training camps and saying, think before you hit send. Think about what you're about to say to the media. Make sure you don't embarrass your team. Make sure you don't embarrass your university. That's exactly what he just did. And after 1 week into the season, do you think the Texas A&M players love hearing that? Do you think that does them any service to go out there and talk bad about their head coach after 1 week? that's doing anything good for Union University. I understand that he felt it was time for him to speak up as a member of the Board of Regents. Well, guess what? You're not a coach, you're not a player, you're not an assistant coach, you have nothing to do with that football team. So for him to go and speak out and feel like he needs to air out his comments on Facebook about this football team that has busted their tail, a bunch of 20, 21-year-old guys that have busted their tail all offseason and now have somebody that they should, have to respect, on the Board of Regents, somebody they should look up to in their university, speak out about their business and about how embarrassing that game was for him personally. Think before you hit send. And I think that guy did not do that.
So here's where you and I are just very different because of our backgrounds. You were a player, you're a part of the program. I've always been a fan. And for me, the Regent in this case speaks for many of the fans who, by the way, have given their money to this program, and now it's easy to view that as being squandered. For a lot of these people who write these checks, these are not, multimillionaires. These are people who have to dig deep in their wallet to support this program. And frankly, I think the majority of A&M boosters and fans probably agree with the Regent more so than they run to the defense of Kevin Sumlin here.
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. I think that there is something to be said behind closed doors. Go to the president, go to the chancellor, go to the head coach in his office, go to the AD. Tell them what you think about the head coaching situation. Tell them there should be a change made. I don't see the upside of doing it on Facebook. I know that he's speaking out for himself, speaking out for a ton of fans about the way they felt watching that game the other night. I don't see the upside to it, though. I really don't. You're not going to affect the change after week one. You're not going to fire Kevin Sumlin this week. All you're doing is bringing negative attention to this football program and not helping them win games. Now they're answering questions about this Board of Regents member week two going into preparation for some pretty big football games coming up.
Kevin Grubb says in the comment section, Aggies lost because their players stopped playing. Maybe that's the case, but this is one of those stories that's not going away anytime soon there in College Station. That's Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. This is AT&T's SEC Country Live. We're glad to have you with us. And, of course, remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Coming up in just a moment, we'll check in with Mike Griffith in Knoxville, Tennessee, to talk to him about the Tennessee Vols. Before that, though, as we mentioned earlier, a great brand new feature here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, an opportunity to look back in the past at one of the great seasons in SEC history. And, this weekend, as Georgia gets ready to travel to Notre Dame, a lot of folks think about the last time and the only previous time that Georgia's played the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, leading up to a national championship for the Georgia Bulldogs back in 1980. But in that year of 1980, that wasn't the only big thing to happen around the SEC. Let's take a look back at 1980 as our season to remember here today, brought to you by our friends at Tony Chachere's.
It's time for Tony Chachere's Seasons to Remember and a look back at 1980. A year remembered fondly by Georgia fans because it ended with a national championship. The Bulldogs, led by legendary Herschel Walker, defeated Notre Dame 17-10 in the Sugar Bowl to cap off an undefeated season. But Georgia's presence in that Sugar Bowl was aided by the other Bulldogs in the SEC, as Mississippi State beat Bear Bryant in Alabama. It was the Crimson Tide's first loss to the Bulldogs since 1957, and it ended a 28-game winning streak for Alabama. 1980 was also a good year for South Carolina, a program not yet in the SEC, but a season remembered for the dominance of running back George Rogers, who ran his way to a Heisman Trophy with 1,781 yards on the ground. It's a part of the heritage of this great conference, moments that prove the SEC stands the test of time. Truly, a season to remember.
And Seasons to Remember here on AT&T's SEC Country Live is brought to you by Tony Chachere. And if you're looking to spice up your next tailgate, look no further than Tony Chachere, tailgating champion since 1972. Tony Chachere's makes everything taste great. All right, well, get back to our AT&T First and 10 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live. We'll have more on, by the way, Georgia's trip to Notre Dame a little later on in the program. For now, let's check in on item number 6 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list here and take a look at Auburn coach Gus Malzahn. Now, Georgia-Notre Dame, not the only big non-conference game in the SEC here this weekend. You've also got Auburn going there to take on Clemson. And one of the big storylines for this game for Auburn-Clemson is the presence of quarterback Jarrett Stidham. Probably not a great performance against Georgia Southern this past Saturday, but according to what Gus Malzahn told the media this week, he expects a lot more from his quarterback against Clemson. Let's take a look.
I thought he did a whole lot of good things. Really, the biggest thing that stood out to me is him just needing experience. A guy that hadn't played in 600 days or something like that. And I think I brought that up last week at this time, that was probably the biggest concern I had, because he's performed very well in practice and scrimmages, but there's nothing like a real game. To go out there and play another team and different things that go with it, and communication up front, communication with your teammates, taking command of the offense. But I thought he did a good job. He's extremely tough on himself, which that's usually a sign of a really good quarterback. And I expect him to play better this week.
Kevin Johnson in the comments section says Clemson's a joke. I don't know about that. They are the defending national champion. But Malzahn says he expects better from Stidham against Clemson, a team that may have the best defensive line in the entire country. Do you expect a better performance from Stidham this week?
It's only in college football could a team be the reigning national champions and win 56-3 that we can call them a joke.
Exactly.
It's pretty funny stuff. I thought Clemson looked great last week. And when you talk about the performance that they put up against, obviously Kent State's not your huge game, but I think the pass defense for them is really going to be a huge test for Jarrett Stidham this week. I think Jarrett Stidham's kind of hype train is going to go one of two ways this week. He's either going to be a guy that almost can get Auburn there, just not quite over the hump and really needs to do better, or if he goes in and balls out, his Heisman Trophy campaign really will start to take off. I think we're going to learn a lot about what this Auburn football team is this weekend. I think Kent State had some crazy number of yards last week, like 11 or 15 or something like that. So we're going to find out a lot about what Auburn is as a football team. I still think they've got to do the things like establish the ground game, establish a running game. I know that Kerryon Johnson's going to be out this week with the hamstring injury, but moving forward, this is a big game for them to kind of establish what they are on offense. I think it starts with Jarrett Stidham this week in particular to start establishing himself through the air.
So I want to be very clear about this. I think Auburn wins the game on Saturday, and I think after 2 weeks of the season, we're going to view the Auburn performance against Clemson as the SEC's top performance of the year. Not Alabama in the win against Florida State, as good as that probably would, but I think it was. I think the thorough nature of the Auburn victory that's coming at Clemson is going to get more people talking about Auburn after 2 weeks than Alabama for its win over an ACC team in Florida State. I think it takes a big defensive effort to get there. We saw that from the Auburn defense in week 1. And I just think you have to give Auburn more credit than Alabama if it goes and gets this win by virtue of the fact they'll be going into Death Valley to get it as opposed to Atlanta, a city that Alabama is very comfortable in. After 2 weeks, I believe we're talking more about Auburn than we've talked about Alabama. That's how impressive I believe this Auburn win is about to be against Clemson.
Yeah, and I think if they do win, I think we'll be saying that about them. I'm just not so sure they go in and win this football game. I think when you look at what we thought we had in the passing attack, 184 yards passing against Georgia Southern for Jarrett Stidham, and to me that doesn't jump out and say, man, we're really going to beat Clemson at our own game. I think they've got to establish themselves through the air. They got 351 yards rushing for Auburn last week, but guess what? This Clemson defensive front is a lot better than they saw last weekend. So you're not going to establish yourself up front like you did last week. I think it's going to be a good game. I think that a lot of different components of these two teams are going to face off in good ways. I want to see this Auburn offensive line rise up to the challenge and protect their guy in the backfield. Jarrett Stidham was under pressure, I think, 11 times last week, got sacked 3. That's not what you want against Clemson. You've got to rise to the challenge because they are going to try to get into the backfield and beat you physically.
A lot of differing opinions on this. Stephen Baker says Clemson's overrated. Rodney Grayhouse, the other direction, says not going to happen, B.A. Clemson's going to win. He also says go Dogs. Jerome Webb says Clemson's going to win by 10 points. Cole Gotti says forget this game. Georgia's going to dominate Notre Dame 33-16. We'll get to the Irish and the Dogs later on. But you hear some differing opinions on Clemson. Yeah. And listen, I'm not going to run away from this. Auburn had no reason to show anything offensively against Georgia Southern. There's no motivation there to do that. I think you get a much more diverse passing attack against Clemson on Saturday. There's no doubt in my mind the better of these two quarterbacks plays for Auburn and not for Clemson. And we know what the Auburn running game is capable of here. I mean, I think if any team in the SEC was saving something for its week 2 opponent, it was clearly Auburn saving something for Clemson.
I agree with you absolutely, 100%. That they were definitely saving some of their passing. We didn't see the same route tree that we thought we'd see. It was very basic and some of the things they were trying to do offensively. My only point is that if you're playing Georgia Southern, even if you're not opening the playbook, giving up 3 sacks and 11 hurries against Jarrett Stidham in his passing attempts, he threw the ball 24 times, is not a good look going into Clemson, especially when you're on the road, like you said, not a neutral site. So they're actually going into Death Valley and are going to have to deal with this crowd noise.
What? We're getting ready to bring on Mike Griffin.
Yeah, I know. I
didn't mean to interrupt you. Now, finish your point.
I noticed it out of the corner of my eye. My only point is that I'm not sure this Auburn offensive line holds up against this Clemson defensive line.
Well, speaking of holding up, it's time for me to hold up this to let you know we're checking in Knoxville, Tennessee, where Mike Griffith joins us here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. And listen, Mike, you would never turn it over here on this show, so we've got our turnover trash can for you. And by the way, this is a real working trash can, if you can see. This thing's got people's lunch left in it. This thing stinks to high heavens. This is the degree of work I'm willing to put in to have a sight gag here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. How are you today, my friend? Not hearing Mike Griffith. We'll see if we can get that taken care of. A little bit of an audio issue with Mike. Mike holds tight. We'll see if we can get that situated with you. But listen, that's how far you go on this. This trash can, it's a real trash can. Smell this for a second.
I'm not touching that thing. I saw it out of the corner of my eye when you were bringing it up, and I couldn't even finish what I was saying about Clemson. I don't understand. I have so many questions. I'm glad Mike Griffith's going to be here to answer some of them, because I have so many questions about how that conversation went that Butch Jones was like, you know what? That's a good idea.
All right, I think I actually hear Mike now. Let's check in with Mike. All right, Mike, first of all, welcome to the program. Mike Johnson wanted to ask you, the trash can, did you think that was a good or a bad idea?
Well, they did it last year. You know, it was nothing new for us. I was at the game watching the game, and I guess ESPN needed something to talk about. That game had gotten kind of boring with Georgia Tech winning it, and so I guess they turned to the trash can story. But that was something Tennessee did last year, just something to motivate the guys to try and get turnovers, something fun. I guess Tennessee's not allowed to have fun. Everybody wants to look for reasons to criticize Butch Jones. They couldn't criticize his coaching that night, so they went after the trash can.
Well, speaking of having fun, I think a lot of Tennessee fans probably had fun watching Quentin Dormady in this game. You know, not outstanding numbers, but pretty good. I told Mike early in the show, I think they may have found their quarterback here, and I think that Dormady may be one of those guys that the Vols can lean on a little bit offensively. Were you as impressed with Dormady as I was?
Yeah, you know, I thought he showed a lot of poise in a big-time college football environment. You know, Tennessee had to drive 93 yards. That final possession, you know, good chance that was going to be their last offensive possession. And by the end of the night, Tennessee's offense kind of found itself. That was why Paul Johnson went for two. He said, you know, Tennessee scored two touchdowns on 3 plays in overtime, so Georgia Tech felt pressed to go for that 2-point conversion. Of course, Tennessee's defense rose up, made the stop, and snapped what had been a 4-game winning streak for Georgia Tech against SEC opponents. 2 of those games being Georgia, a pretty good football team.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Mike. I appreciate you bringing that back to our attention. All right, well, the other story we kind of got into with Tennessee a little early in the show was JaJuan Jennings, the wide receiver. Butch Jones not saying a whole lot, just calling him out indefinite. I guess there were some reports out there that he could be gone for up to 12 weeks, I think. How significant is this situation for Jennings, both in terms of his injury and what Tennessee does without him?
Yeah, it could be real significant depending on whether or not these other guys step up. Now, Monday night, it was Marquez Callaway. He's a sophomore, and Marquez Callaway played great. He had 4 catches for over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns in the second half. Tennessee needed some playmakers to emerge. Now, you hoped it didn't take JaJuan Jennings going out to find him, but in this case, when Jennings went out, Marquez Callaway came in. He was a guy that had a great spring, and some great things were expected. I was a little surprised he wasn't a starter and that we didn't see more of him in the first half, but you're going to need somebody other than Marquez Callaway at wide receiver, and, of course, John Kelly got it done at running back. Yeah, speaking of John Kelly, I actually wanted to finish with that, Mike. I really like what Kelly brought to the table the other night. Not a great game, of course, the Tennessee defense, but a lot to like on offense. And I think Kelly was really one of those guys. Looks like they may have found their replacement for Alvin Kamara and Jalen Hurd. Kelly may be able to tote the load this season. Yeah, I think he will. You know, he's going to be the primary ball carrier. I predicted he'd get between 25 and 30 touches against Georgia Tech. And if Georgia Tech wasn't so doggone selfish with that football, I mean, they had the ball for more than 41 minutes against Tennessee. Tennessee only 18 minutes time of possession. And believe it or not, Tennessee actually averaged more yards per rush at 6.7 than Georgia Tech did at 6.2. So I know a lot of Tennessee fans were down and felt like Georgia Tech, really dominated play. But until you have seen Georgia Tech and have a respect for them, and I know Georgia does because Georgia Tech's won the last couple of games against the Bulldogs, but yeah, you mentioned they really are a tough opponent. They're a tough opponent, and honestly, Georgia Tech is just, if you didn't have to play them, I don't know why you'd ever schedule them. I mean, they really make football no fun. They're not fun to watch. It's a really boring style, just like watching paint dry, and it just takes the crowd out of it. I mean, I understand why Georgia Tech plays that style. It's, maybe it's an equalizer, and maybe that's how they win games, but boy, if you play that style and you don't win, then I'd get rid of that coach quick because it is really boring football and kind of like the old 4 corners in basketball. It's just not much fun to watch. Hey, Mike, you are always fun to watch, though. We appreciate your time here today on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We'll look forward to speaking to you again soon. All right, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Listen, Mike, that is worthy of the trash can in the air right there. Somebody said I should pour this on your head. I said, you'd beat me to a pulp if I did that. Folks, this guy's all kinds of like cuisine and stuff in here. This is not a pleasant thing at all here whatsoever. But you know what?
It does smell.
These are the efforts that we go to here on this program. By the way, let's keep it going here with item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10. Speaking of injured players, unfortunately after week 1, we've got a lot of those to talk about. And at least in one case for Alabama, the linebacker Christian Miller, well, he's got a message for fans about his attempt at recovery here. And if you're an Alabama fan, I think you'll like what Miller has to say, although you certainly don't like the circumstances by which he's forced to say it. Take a look at this video he released right after his medical procedure.
What's up, everybody? Just want to let y'all know I had a successful surgery. The road to recovery starts now. And thanks so much for all the prayers and well wishes. It means so much to me, man. Roll Tide.
So a roll tide there from Christian Miller, and you know we talked about this earlier. You know, obviously you love the fact that he's got the successful procedure there, but the absence of these linebackers, that's an issue for an Alabama roster. That's obviously very deep. But losing these guys is potentially a problem. Alabama lost 2 of them in week 1.
It's 100% a problem, and not only do you lose Christian Miller, but you lose his backup in Terrell Lewis. You lose another guy that's a pass rushing depth in Anfernee Jennings for a couple of weeks, probably with his injury. And Rashaan Evans also has an injury in himself. So those are guys that can all rush the passer. And Bama was already scratching and clawing to find pass rushers this year. It's a good thing they have some of these non-conference opponents coming up. You're going to see a little bit more of Dylan Moses. You're going to see Nick Saban reach into his bag of tricks and try to find some people to create some depth. I don't know if you got to go to walk-ons. I don't know if you have to probably break the red shirts off some true freshmen. But some people are going to be playing this weekend and throughout this season now that you're not used to seeing on the field for the Bama defense. I think this is a huge storyline moving forward. I think that Nick Saban's going to have to pull one of his best coaching jobs up front for this defense. And I'm excited to see which direction they go and who they're going to bring on the field to take up the slack.
A lot of comments in the comment section right now. I actually want to go back a little bit to what Mike Griffith was just talking about. Greg Thomas in the comment section says Tennessee stepped up. I didn't expect to see them play that good on offense. That's Greg Thomas's comment. On the flip side of that, though, Kevin Carver says you don't give up over 600 yards of offense and consider yourself a good football team. I mean, that is a fair question. Does Tennessee's defense plan on stopping anybody this year?
Yeah, it's tough. And really, I don't know if this is a good game to judge Tennessee's defense on. I think they tried to get cute on the defensive line. I mentioned this yesterday. They were playing this style of defensive line where they're a yard off the ball and they're trying to read and react to some of the cut blocks. I understand what that was. They thought they were going to be a little bit smarter than teams have in the past that are playing Georgia Tech. Hey, we're going to do this differently. We're not going to let them cut block us. Guess what? Didn't work. And I don't think you'll see that style played by Tennessee moving forward. I think that Shy Tuttle, Khalil McKenzie, some of these other guys on that defense line will be unleashed in the coming weeks, be able to attack the offensive lines of some of the opponents they're going to see. I think they will fare a lot better in the long run. I still think they're going to be missing Darren Kirkland. I know Colton Jumper stepped in and did a decent job. I think they're lacking some sort of athleticism in the front seven, though.
By the way, I'm going to give Greg Steele a lot of credit. Y'all know, at least if you're here every day, Greg's a big Florida fan. And you know what? He's in here taking his lumps here this week after what was not a great weekend for Florida Gators. I'll give him credit for that. He also had a pretty funny comment. He says the trash in the comment section smells worse than the trash in the trash can does. That may be true depending on your perspective. But you know what? If Tennessee can use this to get a victory on Monday night, we can use it here on AT&T's SEC Country Live as well. We need a big AT&T logo on our trash can. That's what we need.
To me, all the times that Tennessee's program and Butch Jones as a head coach have been called trash or garbage or they stink, I don't know, at what point did they have a meeting and go, you know what, let's bring a trash can to the game. We're going to make this a good thing.
I've actually got a little more on this coming up later in the show. We may be on a slightly different field of opinion on that.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Speaking of fields, Terrence Collins says, going back to Mike Griffith talking about Tennessee, he says Tennessee just needs to get its field fixed so the players don't get hurt. My guess is Terrence might be a Georgia fan thinking back to 2015 when Nick Chubb's season came to an end on what a lot of Georgia fans have called generously a cow pasture.
Well, I don't think that, Nick Chubb's the only guy that's been injured on the football field. When you look at Tennessee, the number of people have gone down. I don't know. Maybe it is something about the field. Maybe it's something about the program. But there's definitely something to that for sure.
Greg Thomas said I said roll tide a little early in the show. I don't know if I did, but you know what? Maybe I did do that.
I definitely heard it.
When did I say roll tide?
Right when Christian Miller went offline, you were like, and he gives the roll tide there, and that's a good.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
I noticed it. It definitely stood out to me.
We're all one happy family here around here.
It stood out to me.
I got no problem saying that. Item number 8 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live first and 10 list. So Georgia, we showed this in our Tony Sashary Seasons to Remember package a little earlier, thinking back to 1980, making the trip up to South Bend to play Notre Dame this week. But as it does so, in a story we've talked about a lot this week, that it's starting quarterback Jacob Eason, turning instead to true freshman Jake Fromm. Now, Fromm was pretty impressive in his debut, coming in for the injured Eason against Appalachian State. But it's a whole new ball game against a big step up in competition when it comes to Notre Dame. However, when Kirby Smart met with reporters after practice on Tuesday, he said, as much attention as Fromm getting, this thing on Saturday is not all about Fromm. Here's Kirby.
Certainly it's a lot more heightened awareness when you know you're the guy. Obviously with Jake, I think he's handling the situation really well. Some guys are going to have to play well around Jake. This is not the Jake Fromm show. This is not Jake Fromm's game to win or lose. There's a team traveling up there. And everybody's making a big deal about Jake Fromm. I mean, Jake Fromm's got 10 other people that got to execute so that he can.
So Kirby Smart says it won't be the Jake Fromm show on Saturday for Georgia and Notre Dame. We actually talked about this on my podcast today, Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans at DogNation.com. We are on slightly different sides of this, imagine that. I agree with Kirby that it's not the Jake Fromm show, but I also think that Georgia is not going to get out of South Bend with a win unless Fromm makes some big plays with his arm. I just think the Notre Dame defense, bad last year, probably better this year. You got to be multidimensional to beat that group right now. They're going to need Fromm to make a couple plays on Saturday.
Well, maybe so. I mean, you can go back to the Bama National Championship game against Notre Dame, and their quarterback didn't have to make hardly any plays. A.J. McCarron. I mean, they shoved it down Notre Dame's throat, and I think that's what Kirby Smart's saying, because Kirby Smart, believe it or not, was in house that day when Bama beats Notre Dame in this Brian Kelly style of defense. I think that's where he gets these statements from. I think that Kirby Smart saw at Alabama what you're able to do, switching in and out of quarterbacks that just don't turn the ball over. It doesn't have to be the Jake Fromm show. He doesn't have to go out and throw the ball 25, 30 times. I think that the reason, as a Georgia fan and as a fan base, you were excited about Nick Chubb and Sony Michel being back in the fold is that you could lean on those guys. You could say, hey, here are some senior leadership guys that can really shoulder the load on offense. Jacob Eason had not been proven going into this year, so one quarter doesn't change that. I think they still turn to the ground game, try to establish themselves. Obviously, both of those guys would love to go over 100 yards. Just ask Jake Fromm not to put Notre Dame in a situation to win the game. You don't have to go out, in my opinion, and win it with your arm. Just don't lose the game and play that kind of keep-away style of offense that I know Kirby Smart loves to see his football team play.
I will tell you that I will be going to South Bend for the game this weekend. That means I won't be here tomorrow for AT&T SEC Country Live, but I look forward to be back with you again on Monday as I travel up there with a lot of Georgia fans from DogNation.com to go see this thing. I think a lot of Georgia fans think this is still a game that Georgia can win, despite the fact that it's playing with Fromm instead of Eason. Sounds like you're leaning towards Notre Dame in this game. I mean, how big of an upset is in your mind if Georgia goes out and wins here?
I'm actually not leaning towards Notre Dame. I would have this as a pick 'em if I was Vegas. I think that you're going to get some good things out of that Notre Dame offensive line, and I think that Georgia actually matches up well with their defensive front in terms of what Notre Dame's style will be up front. I'm just not sure what you get out of Jake Fromm, but to me, if you're asking Jake Fromm at any point to win the game with his arm, the offensive philosophy that they went in with probably went out the window. I think that they're just going to try to establish themselves, pound the ball, try to get 5 yards on first down, and try to, some of those play-action plays. I don't think that Kirby Smart wants to veer away from that. I think if Jake Fromm has 25 or 30 pass attempts, that you got off balance. I think that you got off schedule as an offense. I love the way that Kirby Smart's defense is attacking the football right now. I think you saw it the way they flew around against App State last week, and I think it's going to be a great matchup. I'm not sure. I didn't watch Notre Dame this past weekend, so I'm not sure what you're getting. I know they have a strong offensive line. I know that their quarterback looked very good in his first start back this year, so I think that they're feeling really good going into this game. I think you're going to find out a lot about both of these programs after this weekend.
All right, item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Line, 1st and 10. Speaking of a game where we may find out a lot about the teams involved, I think a sneaky good game on Saturday is Missouri and South Carolina.
Yes.
South Carolina scored a lot of points against North Carolina State on Saturday. Missouri put up more than 70 against Missouri State, but still, it was more than 70. The offensive performance apparently so impressive that Taylor Stallworth, a Gamecocks defensive tackle, when he heard about it from reporters this week, he couldn't quite believe what he heard. This is a really funny video. Y'all take a look at this.
What was your reaction when you saw the kind of numbers that Missouri put up Saturday?
I mean, they scored 72 points.
800 yards.
Yeah. So, what do you
possible?
How many minutes they played?
Same.
Yeah.
Nah, man. But yeah, that's crazy. Wow. 800?
800 yards. Yeah, over 800 yards.
Against Missouri State.
Listen, I think it's a really funny video. I love Stallworth's reaction in the moment there. And I think a lot of us, when we saw 70 points, and they probably needed all of them to win the game. I mean, Missouri State hung around for a while with the Tigers there. You know, I know when Jake Bentley met with the media this week, he was asked if this game was going to be a shootout between these two teams. The over-under here is incredibly high. I mean, is it a shootout in your mind? And could you expect to see both these teams once again scoring a bunch of points again?
I think it's going to be a great game. I can definitely see South Carolina being able to kind of implement their offensive game plan a little bit better this week. We mentioned it yesterday. NC State actually doubled the yardage output that South Carolina had, but South Carolina, under Debo Samuel, was able to still go back and win the game. We've talked about this Missouri offense all offseason. I mean, they're the only team in the SEC that returned the 3,000-yard passer, Jamon Moore, the 1,000-yard receiver, and DeMaria Crockett, the 1,000-yard rusher. And that was on full display. You mentioned it, and you just saw it, all the yardage they were able to tabulate throughout this game. 200-yard receivers. Crockett had like 203 rushing yards. They were able to do whatever they wanted to offensively, and I think it's going to be a great task for them and a great task for Will Muschamp to try to match up against this offense and really start to impose your will as a football team. I think that we're going to find out more probably about South Carolina than we will about Missouri. Missouri still gives up a ton of points in yardage to a Missouri State team last week, so I think it is an interesting matchup. I think this is one of the most evenly balanced matchups in terms of the output that you think they're going to have going into this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Tyrone Middlebrook brought up that point, the number of points they actually gave up to Missouri State. It's almost, and he says it's LOL, they gave up 35 points. For me, it is almost more of an LOL than a WOW, spelling wow. I mean, I know that's a long way for a pretty corny thing there, but I'm sorry. But
even for you, B.
Yeah, even for me, that's kind of that's a little bit of a reach and probably not so great. But I do think that Missouri giving up more than 35 or 35 to Missouri State is almost more of a bigger story than actually scoring 70 themselves. Yeah. This is not a good Missouri team. They may be fun to watch, but it's not a good team.
Yeah, and all the questions about Barry Odom and about how they changed their defensive philosophy going into this year, where last year it was kind of half the season as a read and react, and then, you know, kind of unleash the hounds there in the second half of the season. You thought they would have a different defensive philosophy going into the season. Wasn't on display this past weekend. You really saw them still reading and reacting, still struggling defensively. That's why you see all the points get put up. But the question we had was, can this offense carry this defense? From the looks of what I saw this past weekend, they can carry them through some of these tough football games. I think they're going to get more of an output than they did a lot of times last season. So South Carolina will be a good test.
Dustin Goodwin, or I should say Godwin, in the comment section, saying that he thinks South Carolina will win because South Carolina plays defense. I think you're probably right on that, Dustin. Chris McLeod also saying that he thinks that South Carolina, once again, proving it's one of the sleeper teams in the SEC. And I think they will win at Missouri on Saturday. I think after that, I think you're looking at the South Carolina team probably ranked in the top 25 justifiably, which is where, you know, I kind of thought they could be at some point this season. I can't promise you they'll finish there. It gets tough for the Gamecocks the month of November, but this is a team that's going to be ranked at some point in time.
Yeah, so many times we go into these matchups and we say, okay, it's strength on strength. You know, it's Notre Dame's offensive line against Georgia's defensive line strength. This is actually a kind of a weakness on weakness game, if you will. Missouri's defensive line playing against South Carolina's offensive line. South Carolina's offensive line has been a tremendously weak unit all the way dating back to last year. They've got to get a lot better. So it's like, which one's weaker? You know, obviously Missouri's going to try to rush the passer and get back to that Missouri of old. And South Carolina's got to find a way to try to protect Jake Bentley and establish the ground game. I think the key actually is Rico Dowdle in the backfield absolutely ripping off rushing yards for the South Carolina offense.
Dedrick Frazier also has a really interesting comment. He says it's only a matter of time before the Missouri offensive coordinator is himself a head coach. It's Josh Heupel, former Oklahoma quarterback. He was at Utah State, I believe, before coming to Missouri. He is one of the up-and-coming offensive minds in the sport. There is no question about that.
There's no doubt about it. And also when you look at Drew Lock, the way he's, you know, just one game, but the way he looks way better than he has in years past. He's steadily grown as a quarterback. You know, he started off as a freshman. I think we got like a 49% completion percentage out of him. He's steadily grown throughout his career, and you want to see him be able to put it all together this year. And I think that under Josh Heupel, he's going to have a great chance to do that.
Corey Tester in the comment section says, does Tennessee have a chance of winning the SEC? Since he asked that, let's move on with Tennessee here on item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. I want to go back to the trash can here for a moment because, you know, it sounds like you and I are on slightly different sides of this. And first of all, as a little bit of context for exactly what this is, can we show the video of the trash can in action here of, if you missed the game on Monday night, so theirs is the infamous trash can here. The assistant coach running around. You know, they hold that up for every turnovers. They dunk the football into the trash can. It essentially became their de facto trophy once they won. So that's the trash can that everybody was talking about on Twitter, and not everybody talking about it kindly. I thought that Dan Wolken had a really explosive quote from USA Today, taking this to a place I didn't expect anybody to go to here. He says, Tennessee may be more of a solid program today than it was for the half decade before Jones showed up, but the price of it has been tolerating his torturous cliches and infantile slogans, not to mention the trash cans that will undoubtedly show up on Twitter memes from here until the end of his tenure, whenever that may be. So Wolken's essentially saying Tennessee's wrong for using the trash can as a motivational ploy. And listen, I laughed at this like everybody else does. But Wolken's point here that you shouldn't do it because Twitter's going to make fun of it, if that was the rule we occupied in life, then nobody could ever do anything because Twitter makes fun of everything. And frankly, winners ignore Twitter. And that's true in politics, that's true in sports, that's true in everything. Winners ignore Twitter because Twitter is just a bunch of nagging and naysaying. I think Wolken here is too deep in the media bubble, and I don't think this is something that Butch Jones ought to have to apologize for.
Listen, winners do ignore Twitter, but so far Butch Jones hasn't shown that he's going to win anything except the championship of life. And I think that's where this comes from. I don't think this is a one-time thing for Dan Wolken. I don't think he looked at it and go, oh man, this is a bad idea. I think it's everything compiled for this Tennessee program. And listen, I talked to quite a few Tennessee fans this past weekend after that game, Monday night, Tuesday, that were really mad about this. And I think it's just another point in the narrative in the direction that why are you going to put a trash can on your sideline? I have so many questions about this. Like, how did you assign who was going to carry the trash can? Like, how did that guy get that job? Hey, you're going to be the garbage guy. You're going to be the one that
maybe it's like on this show, and no one was assigned it. You just step up and volunteer. Maybe that's what it is. You just step up and volunteer for the trash can.
I think that obviously the people are going to be a little bit more tolerant because you did win the football game. But trust me, at some point this year, if and when Tennessee goes down the tubes, you're going to look at this situation and go, man, this team is garbage. And everybody is going to be showing that picture of Team 121 across that trash can. I'm not opposed to it. I love when teams bring out the sledgehammer and the title belts and the chains like Miami's doing. There was so many different ways to go about this. You could have brought out a basketball goal to the sideline and had them dunk on the sideline and do that kind of thing. Just the trash can, to me, like Dan Wolken said, just fits that narrative of what Tennessee football has been under Butch.
James Crump in the comment section essentially echoes what you said, that it becomes an unfortunate image of the Tennessee season goes south. Dustin Goodwin says 5-star hearts ignore Twitter. And Dustin, that's kind of my point, that the 5-star heart thing, the champion of life, those kinds of things are far worse because Butch Jones is lying to himself if he thinks a 5-star heart is just as important as a 5-star player is. And he's lying to himself if he thinks a champion of life is just as important as an SEC championship. Those are terrible cliches and horrible motivational ploys that do kind of fall flat. This, to me, is really kind of a nothing. And the fact that Twitter grabs and makes a meme out of it, this is a little bit like, and I don't mean to go down this road, but this is a little bit like ESPN pulling Robert Lee off the UVA game the other day because they thought that would create Twitter memes. You can't control Twitter memes. You might as well just not even look at them.
I'm actually shocked that you've gone this route, too, because it seems like we talked a bunch in the offseason about just, you feel like Butch Jones is just a little bit out of touch. I mean, you really, some of the things he said, it's like he doesn't think before he says, man, this is a bad idea for me to come out and say something else like this. And it's just another point in that direction. I feel like it's another little mark in that box where you say Butch Jones just doesn't understand how people look at his program and how people view him as a head coach.
But do you hear what I'm saying? Trash can is different than champion of life. It's different than 5-star heart. Jones has said some dumb things. I don't put the trash can in that category. I'm not telling you it's the greatest idea ever, but I don't think it's as bad as 5-star heart and champion of life.
I do. I just think it fits into the same narrative where, you know what, that's probably not how you want to be looked at as a head coach. And although all those other things are about character, I think this just goes along with your football team. I think it's a bad look.
Barry Couch in the comment section said y'all would have made fun of anything that Butch Jones did. There are a lot of people who would. And here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, we do have fun with a lot of stuff. And that's one of the reasons why if you're Butch Jones, you just can't pay attention to that kind of stuff.
Maybe so. I think like I said, there was a lot of different ways to go about it. I love what Miami did with the chain. I love, some of these people coming out with these sledgehammers and doing the things on the sideline.
How about Texas A&M's pimp game? Did you like that?
I didn't make fun of that because I think that's, kind of a cool thing. I think that obviously his players enjoy it. It's a trash can to me. If you're going to dunk it in the trash can, why not just bring out a basketball goal and put it on the sideline and paint it orange?
AT&T's SEC Country Live. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And speaking of AT&T, let's do our AT&T look ahead right now. Taking a look at some of those big non-conference games on Saturday, or at least not the big ones, more like the cupcakes for us here this weekend. But there's a reason to pay attention to some of these games, I believe. Florida, Northern Colorado, that game's been moved up to noon, trying to stay away from Hurricane Irma. By the way, for those of you down in Florida or any place where this storm's expected to hit, our thoughts and prayers are with you around SEC country this week. At 3:30 on Saturday, Alabama, Fresno State. Texas A&M against Nichols. Nichols, a team that almost upset Georgia a year ago. That'll be at 7 p.m. Texas A&M trying to get over the hangover from last week's loss to UCLA. Then LSU in Chattanooga, a game at 7:30 p.m. that I think could be interesting because you may see a good bit of Miles Brennan in that game for LSU. Alabama, I think the same thing in terms of you got to get Jalen Hurts going offensively here a little bit. These are cupcakes. I'm not telling you they're fun for 60 minutes. But I think there's a reason to watch all 4 of those games on the board for the AT&T look ahead.
I don't doubt it at all. I think there's storylines when you talk about all those games. First of all, Florida, what's the quarterback position going to look like? Are we going to see what Florida actually wants to be offensively? Alabama trying to get back on track offensively and also deal with those injuries up front that we just talked about. Texas A&M, what are they? What are they without Nick Starkel? They're, all of a sudden they're facing a difficult decision at the quarterback position. And LSU, obviously they have everybody back healthy, but Danny Etling still establishing himself as a passer, and you want to see what their packages are going to look like without Arden Key moving forward.
All right, that is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. Here on our program, we talk a lot about Tigers. But it's usually the LSU variety or the Auburn variety. But today, as we close up the show, the way we always do, with our own champion of life, speaking of the aforementioned Butch Jones, a very different kind of Tiger makes an appearance on AT&T's SEC Country Live today. Look at this tweet from our friends over at WSB-TV in the town where we live in Atlanta. So a tiger got loose in an Atlanta neighborhood this morning. That is the scariest thing I've ever heard. Apparently it attacked the dog.
Atlanta, to me, and I love living in Atlanta. I really do. I love the town. I love everything it represents. But it's the can't get right of major metropolitan areas. I mean, look at what the sports teams have done here. It's just the interstate collapses. There's always something going on. I think a chicken truck overturned like a month ago, and then a tiger roaming down during the morning rush hour down in Jonesboro. It just fits the narrative for me so well for Atlanta. I roll over and I see that on Twitter this morning, and I'm like, only in Atlanta can you find a tiger going down the interstate.
And if you've been watching the Georgia-Auburn series, you're surprised the tiger got the best of the dog. First time that's happened since 2013.
As soon as I see the look in your eye, he's got this glow, and I'm like, oh, he's about to come out with something here. Can't wait for this one, B.A.
And with that, I'm out for the week. Mike Johnson will be back tomorrow. I'm on my way to South Bend for the Georgia-Notre Dame game. I'll come back and talk to you all about that on Monday. Thanks for being here with us. Subscribe to the podcast. Share the show on Facebook. He'll see you Thursday. I'll see you Monday. Back here again for AT&T's SEC Country Live.